Good evening, everybody. This is Mayor Greg Verga. I'm here in a room off of the library at West Parish Elementary School. I'm joined by our CFO, Connor McCorkle, and Bill Melvin, who's the vice chair of the Gloucester School Committee, as well as a member of the negotiating teams. We have been here, not Connor, but Bill and I and other members of this committee and administration since Friday, and over the last 7 days, we've been here for about 80 hours so far, trying to negotiate the teacher's contract. As you know, we are in the midst of a teacher's strike. So what I've asked these gentlemen to do is join me today to bring you up to speed. One of the concerns out there is just trying to get a handle on the city's budget. So I've asked Connor in to talk about how we got to the current fiscal year. We're in fiscal year 25. So I'm going to ask Connor to give us an idea of how we built this year's budget and where we stand. And then I've got a lot of other questions for him.
So FY25 was a pretty challenging budget year. We discovered as we started putting it together that a lot of our fixed costs were increasing at a rate that is a little bit faster than what our Prop 2.5 would allow for. We were fortunate in FY25 to have the ARPA funds, which come from the federal government as a result of COVID. We used $1 million of those ARPA funds to balance the school's operating budget. And we also used stabilization funds to balance the school's budget as well. So we used $1.25 million of stabilization funds to help fund special ed and out-of-district transportation costs. In addition to balance the budget, we had to use $611,000 of free cash. And even after using all of those one-time funding sources, we still had a deficit on the city side of $1.94 million. And we had a deficit on the school side of $2.2 million. So unfortunately, we had to make cuts in FY25 on both the school and the city side to get things to balance.
All right, our director just poked his head in and asked that we speak louder, so I'm hoping that you can hear us now. So Connor, I've got a bunch more questions, but why don't we talk about the upcoming fiscal 26 budget? And, you know, we're looking at level funding the departments, and what are some of the sort of speed bumps in the road that have led us to projected deficits?
Right. So in FY26, we have to do the same planning, which is increased fixed costs, but we don't have those one-time funding sources like ARPA or ESSER that the schools had to tap into to balance the budget. So we're expecting to see health and liability insurance go up by about $1 million. Our debt service is going to go up about $2 million. And our pension liability goes up about $1 million next year. So we'll have to catch up and cover the gap from the one-time funding sources we used in FY25, as well as fund the new activity for FY26.
All right, so one of the things, a few things that have been raised around town during the negotiations for both the paraprofessionals and the teachers was, you know, there are pockets of money that the city has that they can just use to give them what they're asking for. You know, some of these things that have been brought up are free cash. So let's take one at a time. Free cash. What is free cash? What's its purpose? How do we get it? What do we do with it? And how do we access it?
Yeah. So free cash in a regular business would be considered something like retained earnings. So it's the surplus, either income or expenses that we planned for that didn't occur in a fiscal year. We can use free cash to support current year operations, or we can use it to fund one-time capital expenditures. I pulled some demographics on our free cash compared to other communities. So in the 15 surrounding communities to us, Gloucester ranks 9th in terms of free cash. So there are 8 communities around us that have more generally. And if you look at 15 communities in the Commonwealth with a similar population, Gloucester actually ranks 14th out of 15 in free cash. So we tend to be pretty light on free cash, and we do tend to use free cash to cover any budget deficits that we might run into. I think we have struck a good balance of keeping our free cash at the same level or increasing it marginally each year, while also using it to cover the essential services.
And another thing about free cash, I mean, over the years, we budgeted very conservatively, before my time in my first couple of years here. Which in the end led to free cash, which leads people, myself included, say, well, why don't we spend that on the stuff we needed during the year?
Right.
Now the budget, so this year we may have a similar amount of free cash, but the budget we built for this year, its free cash will be reflected next year, is probably going to be significantly less because we were a lot less conservative because we knew how tight it was going to be.
Right. So we definitely pushed, in years when we would have been conservative in revenue. In FY 25 and again in FY 26, we're going to be less conservative with the revenue. We want to budget for every dollar that we think is going to come in, which as a result means we won't have as much free cash at the end of the fiscal year.
Great, so free cash is certified by the state after, well, why don't you give the ABC of?
Yeah, so the fiscal year runs July 1st to June 30th. The goal is always to have free cash done sometime between October and December. This year, we're looking more closer to December. And we're thinking it would be somewhere, maybe a little bit less than it was in FY 23.
Mhm. And free cash comes in, the mayor, in this case me, we submit a memo to the city council with recommendations. There is an ordinance in place that was adopted early on in Safathia Taken's term as mayor, that's spelled out where the free cash would go, creating several specific accounts, and maybe you could probably remember them
I do.
better than I.
So we have they're called stabilization funds. I like to think of like savings accounts. We have a capital stabilization fund that we move a set amount of money into each year. That funds capital purchases related to buildings, cars, things like that. General stabilization, which would be a savings account that we could use for any emergent expense that's unplanned. We have a building stabilization, which helps us maintain the buildings without having to take out debt. And we also fund our OPEB trusts with free cash, which is other pensionable employee benefits. So those are our retired staff. We're building a trust fund so that the city doesn't have to fund their benefits once they retire. This trust fund will have enough income to fund those benefits.
And early on, when we were talking about some of the speed bumps, I don't remember if you mentioned the pension liability. If
Yes.
you didn't, can you just highlight it for a second time, if that's the case?
Yep. So over the years, I'm told as far back as the 60s, cities and towns across the Commonwealth did not properly fund their pensions, their city pensions. I think it was when Deval Patrick was the governor. He changed that. He said you have to have your unfunded pension liability fully funded by 2040. The city has agreed to fund that by 2034. So what that means for us is each year, our pension liability goes up by about $1 million until we get to fiscal year 2034, when we'll have fully funded the pension liability.
So there's $1 million additional this year for a total of 13
and a half.
$13.5 million of our budget is to sort of backfill, I guess, deferred payments to fund the pension.
Correct.
So we know what free cash is defined as, we know where it comes from, we know where it goes. Now to get it out, what happens there?
So to use free cash, we would do what's called a supplemental appropriation. So the department requesting it, which is usually my department in finance, would forward a request to your office. If you approved it, it would go to the city council. It would go to a subcommittee of the city council called Budget and Finance. And then it would be referred back to the larger city council for a final vote. So there's 3 layers of review and approval.
And I believe it's 2/3 vote.
That's true.
2/3. And we recently did take 600 out of stabilization for some vehicles. We have a very old fleet. And instead of borrowing the money, which would create another issue with our budget,
Right.
we use that one-time money for that one-time purpose.
Right, we're trying to borrow as little as possible. So this year, we decided to fund vehicle expenses out of our capital stabilization fund.
And just to clarify, the purpose of rainy day accounts is for when it's raining, but for those specific categories and one-time expenditures, because you can't anticipate free cash coming in at an equal amount every year to replenish it.
Right.
So it's not wise to use the money for recurring expenses such as salaries.
Right.
Proposition 2.5, you may not have even been born when that passed, but can you give a quick definition of what that is?
Yes, so every year, our assessor's office establishes our tax base. Based on the values of homes, they set a tax rate. Year over year, that base cannot increase more than 2.5%.
Mhm.
So basically, it says you can take your base from the prior year, you can add 2.5% to it, and that's the max that you can tax in the upcoming year.
Okay, final topic related to Prop 2.5 for Connor before I turn it over to Bill. So there's such a thing as a Proposition 2.5 override, which for the record has never successfully happened in Gloucester. We've had successful debt exclusions to purchase Poles Hill and to fund the new East Vets Elementary School, but we've never successfully had a Proposition 2.5 override. To get an override on the ballot, it's simply, with my recommendation and support, the city council can simply vote to put it on the ballot, and then obviously the majority of the voters had to vote to support it. Can you give sort of an idea of what different amounts of money would equal to a total override, what it would mean for the average taxpayer?
Yes. So an override would allow us to increase our tax base. So say our tax base is $100 million in FY 26. If we had a successful override, it would allow us to permanently increase our tax base by $3 million, which we could then increase by 2.5% each fiscal year.
$3 million is just the number you're selecting. Could be any
Right.
amount.
It could be any
for the
amount,
case
but for
of
the
this-
case in this $3 million. And if we did a $3 million override, early estimates would say it's about $220 to $250 a year for the average homeowner.
Right, and that is for eternity. Whereas a debt exclusion in the case of the property we purchased or the new school, once that mortgage is paid off, that is taken.
Correct. They could do an underride, but those are very uncommon and quite challenging because you're compounding the 2.5%
Mhm.
every year.
All right, so if hopefully this was helpful, Connor's information. If you have further questions, feel free to email my office. We will have Connor answer them, email them back to post on Facebook to direct you to that. But we just want to give you a better understanding of how the budget works and what some of the limitations are and what some of the challenges are lying ahead for the next fiscal year. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bill Melvin, who will talk about the status of our negotiations today.
Yes, so first of all, I want to say that I'm thankful to be here tonight and talk a little bit about Gloucester teachers' salaries. Really, my biggest concern is that I don't fall through this very small library chair, so I'm going to hold it together for at least a few minutes. So I'm going to talk about Gloucester teacher salaries, and we're really going to talk about, we have 3 stories to tell you tonight concerning teacher salaries. First year, masters, 5th year masters times 30, plus 30, and then top salary masters plus 60. A couple of talking points right off the bat. Gloucester teacher salaries are already very competitive with our neighboring and comparison districts. After 7 days of striking, the union gave the school committee the first new salary proposal since September 23rd, earlier today. The school committee will present our new salary proposal to the union at approximately 7 p.m. tonight, basically 7 hours after receiving it, 6 or 7 hours after receiving it, just hours after we receive the union's proposal. We will show you how the school committee salary proposal compares with Salem and Danvers, 2 local communities that the union has cited repeatedly as benchmarks. It should be noted that the economics of these 2 communities are different than ours. In other words, Salem, Danvers, different economic kind of picture than what you might see here in Gloucester. So with that, we're going to talk about first up. First 3 years for a teacher with a master's degree. So that's us hiring somebody with a master's degree right out of school. In FY 25, Danvers starting pay is $61,597. Salem is $56,929 or $928, and Gloucester is $61,363. Lower than Danvers by $216. So a brand new teacher, first year, we're going to get you within $216 of the Danvers salary. We're higher than Salem by $4,435. Fiscal year 26, so this is second year teach, so someone that's into their second year, Danvers, the pay in Danvers would be 66,927, Salem 63,351, and Gloucester 66,124. So we're lower than Danvers by $803, and we're higher than Salem by $2,773. So it's a second year teacher, master's degree. And then in fiscal year 27, FY 27, the Danvers teacher would be making 72,733, Salem 75,42, and and Gloucester 71,266. That's lower than Danvers by $1,467 and higher than Salem by $724. So new teacher over those first 3 years, those are the numbers with Salem, Gloucester compared to Danvers and Salem. By June of 2027, a new Gloucester teacher's salary would be $2,486 less than Danvers, but $7,932 more than Salem. So, now we're going to talk about a teacher with a master's plus 30 in their 5th year of teaching. So in so a teacher's 5th year of teaching here in Gloucester, in fiscal year 25, Danvers teacher is going to make 78,864, Salem 69,029, and Gloucester 78,244. That puts us $620 less than Danvers, and then a Danvers teacher, but $9,215 more than a 5th year teacher in Salem. Next, we go to fiscal year 26. Danvers teacher making 84,773, Salem teacher 77,285, and a Gloucester teacher 84,139. Lower than Danvers by $634, but higher than Salem by $6,854. And then we go to FY 27, 5th year teacher, master's plus 30. The Danvers teacher is going to be making 91,204, Salem 86,249, and Gloucester 90,503. Lower than Danvers by $701, but still higher than Salem by $4,254. By June of 2027, the Gloucester teacher salary would be $1,955 less than Danvers, but $20,323 more than Salem. That's for a teacher with a master's plus 30 in their 5th year of teaching. Lastly, we're going to go to a teacher with a master's plus 60. So this is a top step teacher. Salary increases include step movement and cost of living increases. Fiscal year 2025, a Danvers teacher is going to be making $112,355. A Salem teacher, $96,707, and a Gloucester teacher, $100,299. Excuse me. That's lower than Danvers by $12,126, and higher than Salem by $3,522. FY 26, a Danvers teacher, $116,006, Salem $103,530, and Gloucester $104,269. Lower than Danvers by $11,738, higher than Salem by $738. Finally, in FY 27, a Danvers teacher with a master's plus 60 on the top step in Danvers is going to make $120,066. A Salem teacher at the top, $110,353, and a Gloucester teacher, $108,470. So So we're lower than Danvers by 11,596, lower than Salem by 1,883. By June 2027, this Gloucester teacher's salary would be 35,460 less than Danvers, but 2,377 more than Salem. I think it's important to add the fact that local and teacher workdays, local and DART comparisons. We've just gonna stick with the three districts that we've talked about. The Danvers Salem, if you're a K-5 teacher, your day is 7 hours, 25 minutes. Salem teacher, 6 hours and 52 minutes, and a Gloucester teacher, 6 hours and 17 minutes. If you're in a middle school, 6 through 8, Danvers is 725, Salem is 652, and Gloucester is 632. And if you're a high school teacher, the Danvers teacher's day is 7 hours and 25 minutes. Salem is 6 hours and 52 minutes, and a Gloucester teacher is 6 hours and 52 minutes as well. So that's our presentation. I think it's important to say that we've made, in a general sense, we do very well with new teachers and kind of middle career teachers, and we're trying to make some adjustments to the top to help out those longtime teachers here in Gloucester. So that's kind of where we're at with it tonight.
Great, thanks, Bill. So that proposal or counter proposal will be heading within the next 5 minutes down to the union, which is downstairs in the cafeteria. So I think it's important that, we heard from Connor, in spite of some of the challenges we had in this current fiscal year and the anticipated challenges in the coming fiscal year, the city is still able, the school is still able to make a very competitive proposal to our teachers. And we care deeply about the teachers, we care deeply about our paraprofessionals, and we care deeply about you and your children and grandchildren. And as I mentioned in my press conference last night, my grandchildren, my 2 grandchildren, should have been in the school today, not me. It's time to get the teachers back to work. And if you have further questions, please let us know. But please know that myself, Bill, the rest of the school committee and the administration is working very hard for very long hours over these last few days. And we will continue as long as it takes, but hopefully not too much longer, because kids need to be in school and need to be learning. So thank you all and good night.